Question 1. The way to approach any boundaries question is to identify what kind of grammatical structure sits on each side of the blank. Because punctuation marks are not interchangeable, each one has a very specific job. Before this blank, we have traditional culture and modern developments coexist harmoniously. This is an independent clause because it has a subject, traditional culture and modern developments, a verb, coexist, and it expresses a complete thought. After the blank, we have offering vistas that include both stunning skyscrapers and lush landscapes. This is a participle phrase. A participle phrase begins with a verb ending in ing or ed and functions as an adjective. It modifies something in the main clause. It is not an independent clause because it has no subject. Offering here is not a finite verb, it's a participle. Now we apply the rules. A semicolon must separate two independent clauses or items in a complex list. Because offering vistas is not independent, option C breaks this rule. A colon introduces a list, which is an explanation or an appositive, that elaborates on a complete thought. It would imply the vistas are a definition or example of harmonious coexistence, which doesn't fit in this instance. Option B is awkward because it is technically misused. And a period ends a complete sentence, so option D would leave offering vistas stranded as a fragment. However, a comma is exactly what attaches a participle phrase to a clause. The phrase offering vistas describes Taiwan as a place, and the comma signals that relationship. So the answer is A. Question 2. Before the blank, sandflies are prevalent in many tropical regions around the world. Subject, verb, complete thought. This is an independent clause. After the blank, their bites can be not only bothersome but also potentially dangerous. Again, here we have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought, so this is another independent clause. So when you're joining two independent clauses, we have three options. A period, which would make it a separate sentence, a semicolon, which keeps them as one sentence but signals some separation, or a comma, plus a coordinating conjunction. And these are the ones that are known as fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So anything else here would be a run-on or a comma splice. So option A uses no punctuation, which makes it a run-on. Option B uses a semicolon and, which is redundant, because a semicolon already does the job of adding and. Option D places the comma in the wrong location. The pattern requires comma and a conjunction, not conjunction and then a comma, so this is wrong. Option C uses a comma and the coordinating conjunction and. The comma comes before and, which is standard, and the result is a properly joined compound sentence, so the answer is C. Question 3. The hinge of this question is the word consequently and its grammatical category. Consequently is a conjunctive verb. It belongs to a family that includes however, therefore, moreover, furthermore, thus, and nevertheless. These words look like they should join clauses because they express logical relationships, such as cause, contrast, or addition, but grammatically, they're adverbs, not conjunctions, and that distinction is important. Coordinating conjunctions can join two separate independent clauses with just a comma. Conjunctive adverbs, however, cannot. If you try to use a conjunctive adverb with only commas between two independent clauses, you create what is called a comma splice, which is one of the most common errors in formal writing. Two clauses here are both independent. Electrical circuits are fundamental to powering modern technology and devices, stands on its own, and these circuits enable a wide range of electronic devices to function seamlessly, also stands on its own. Option A puts no punctuation at all between them and tries to use consequently like a conjunction, which produces a fused sentence. Option B and C wrap consequently in commas while still trying to use it to join the two clauses. Both of these produce comma splices. The comma before consequently is doing the joining work that the comma alone cannot do. Option D, however, handles this correctly. A period ends the first independent clause, and a comma after consequently marks it as an introductory adverb at the start of the second sentence. This is the standard pattern for using conjunctive adverbs between sentences, so the right answer is D. Question 4. Two separate grammar rules are being tested here, and you have to get both right. The first rule concerns adjectives. When you place two adjectives in front of a noun, you have to decide whether they are coordinate adjectives, which are equal in weight and each independently modifying the noun, or cumulative adjectives, where one modifies the other. There are two tests. If you can swap their order, or insert and between them and the phrase still works, they are coordinate adjectives, and you use a comma. but if they sound wrong reordered, they are cumulative and no comma is used. Here, the writer has already inserted and between unique and enchanting. The comma is the alternative to and, you use one or the other and not both. Writing unique, comma, and enchanting is like saying and, comma, and. That eliminates options B and C, which both place a comma before and. The second rule concerns the conjunction but. Before the blank, we have hot air balloons offer a unique and enchanting experience, which is an independent clause. After but, we have many people wonder how these colorful giants are able to achieve flight without any engines or propellers, which is another independent clause. But is a coordinating conjunction, so when it joins two independent clauses, it requires a comma directly before it. Option A has no comma before but, which produces a run-on. Only option D is correct. Command of evidence, question 1. So the claim is that Poe uses the strange setting to develop the story's mood. This is a two-part claim, and the correct quotation must demonstrate both parts simultaneously. A quote that shows the setting without mood fails. A quote that shows mood without setting also fails. We need a quote where the physical environment itself generates the atmosphere. Mood in literary analysis refers to the emotional feeling a passage produces in the reader, such as dread, joy, or unease. It is created through sensory details, word choice, and imagery. Setting refers to the physical environment of the story. Option A describes the narrator meeting his friend, Fortunato, at the carnival. The carnival is mentioned, but the focus is on Fortunato's character. He is drunk. He greets the narrator warmly. The quote tells us about people, not place. The carnival setting is barely sketched in at all. In option B, we describe a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. This pure setting work, and the mood is unmistakable. Notice how the diction generates emotion. We have deep crypt, which suggests that we're entombed. The foulness of the air suggests decay, and flambeau, rather to glow than flame, tells us that the torches can barely stay lit. The air itself is so polluted that it suffocates the fire. Every detail builds dread. This is what setting developing mood would really look like in practice. Option C describes the architectural function of the recess, constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between two of the colossal supports of the roof of the cave. This describes the setting, but it's factual and neutral. There's no emotion. And option D describes an action. Therefore, we can conclude that option B is correct, because the setting itself creates a mood. Question 6. The passage describes an excavation where researchers found a juvenile mandible. The mandible has a robust jawline, like Homo erectus, but other features are inconsistent with that classification. The blank introduces a comparison to a species of hominins believed to have evolved much later than Homo erectus, which, based on the context, refers to Homo sapiens. The question asks which finding would most directly support the student's claim. To support the claim, the finding must do two things. 1. Describe a feature actually present on the excavated fragment, and 2. Link that feature to Homo sapiens specifically. This is what direct support means in evidence questions. The evidence must connect concretely to the specific case under discussion. Option A states, the presence of a prominent chin aligns more with the features of Homo sapiens. The phrase, the presence of, is critical. It identifies the chin as actually present on the fragment, and the comparison ties it to Homo sapiens. Both requirements are met. Anatomically, this is also correct. A pronounced mental protuberance, or chin, is one of the diagnostic features distinguishing Homo sapiens from earlier hominins like Homo erectus, who typically had receding chins. Option B mentions a large, rounded brain case and low brow ridge. These are features that Homo sapiens possess, but the option describes them in the abstract. It never states that these features are present on the fragment, so without that link, it's just a fact and not a piece of evidence. Option C gives a date range for Homo erectus. Dates do not speak to anatomy, and the claim is about anatomical consistency rather than chronology. Option D talks about illicit excavation, which is entirely off topic. This is a legal matter, not a classification matter. So the best answer is option A. It identifies a specific feature on the actual fragment and ties it to Homo sapiens. Question 7. The claim about P.K. Page's poem has two specific descriptors. The landlady is a constant presence and a prying presence. These are two distinct character traits, and the correct evidence must illustrate both. A quote showing only constancy or only prying is incomplete. To unpack the terms, constant means ever present, unceasing. The landlady is always there. Prying, however, means intrusively curious and snooping into things that are not her business. Option A reads, she pads on the landing like a pulse, unlocks their keyholes with a wire of sight. 2 images and 2 traits. The simile, like a pulse, conveys constancy. A pulse never stops, it is continuous. This makes the landlady's presence feel involuntary and ceaseless, like a heartbeat, which pulses. The second image, unlocks their keyholes with a wire of sight, conveys prying. She peers through keyholes with such intensity that her gaze is figured as a wire entering the lock. So this already supports both of our claims. We can conclude that this is the right answer. But let's look at the wrong answers. Option B describes the boarders rather than the landlady. That's already wrong. Option C says, yet knows them better than their closest friends, their cupboards, and the secrets of their drawers. This shows her knowledge, and this shows prying, but it doesn't show constancy or the act itself. It's a result rather than the behavior. Option D, each face is dialed to 0 quickly. She appears stippled with curious flesh. This shows curiosity, but it does not convey constancy. So option A is our best answer. Question 8. The hypothesis is that the dancing plague was a primarily psychological phenomenon driven by mass hysteria. Notice the precision required here. The phrase mass hysteria refers to a sociological and psychological phenomenon, a collective psychogenic outbreak where shared belief, anxiety, and social pressure causes groups of people to exhibit symptoms with no physical cause. Mass hysteria is not caused by toxins, chemicals, or pathogens, so the correct supporting finding must point to a psychological, social, or cultural factor. Option A notes the decline of the phenomenon after the 17th century. This is descriptive. It tells us when the dancing mania stopped, but says nothing about why it started. It doesn't support any causal hypothesis. Option B suggests environmental contaminants like heavy metals or toxins affecting the nervous system. This is a physiological explanation. It proposes a physical, chemical cause for the symptoms. If it is true, it would suggest that dancing mania was a poisoning event rather than a psychological one, which contradicts the mass hysteria hypothesis. Option C proposes ergotism, which is poisoning from a fungus that grows on rye and produces compounds that are similar to the drug LSD. Ergotism is a real historical phenomenon and has been proposed as an alternative explanation for the dancing plague, but this is a neurological or chemical cause, so this competes with the claim of mass hysteria. And option D points to religious and cultural practices surrounding dancing and trance states, coupled with social expectations and religious fervor. These are the exact kinds of factors that drive mass hysteria. Shared belief systems, religious intensity, cultural permission to enter trance states, and social pressure to conform all create the conditions for collective psychogenic outbreaks. This finding directly supports the psychological, sociological hypothesis. So the answer is D. Okay, command of evidence. Question 9. The passage establishes a few facts. Food away from home accounts for about half of consumer food spending. The number of food away from home retailers has grown substantially since 1990, especially in non-metro countries, with the restaurants driving most of that growth. The USDA released 2019 data on average sales per establishment by sector. The blank should be completed by an answer that is both consistent with the passage's narrative of growth and plausibly drawn from a chart of average sales per establishment by sector. Option A claims full-service restaurants averaged over $2 million in sales, a decrease from the previous year. This conflicts with the passage's phrasing, which is entirely about the expansion and growth. Without explicit chart data showing a year-over-year decline, this contradicts the established narrative. Option B refers to a large urban non-metropolitan areas. This phrase is contradictory. Non-metropolitan, by definition, automatically excludes large urban areas. So this is a definitional error and automatically cannot be correct. Option C claims limited service restaurants like cafeterias and snack bars posted the highest average sales. This is immediately not plausible. Limited service establishments by their natures have lower price points, smaller tickets, and lower per establishment sales than full service restaurants. Industry data consistently shows full service averaging higher per establishment sales. Option D, however, states that on average, 9 new limited service restaurants open in all 3 sectors. This aligns with the narrative of expansion across sectors, including non-metro counties, so the best answer would be D. The passage explains that the chart shows temperature anomalies, deviations from the 20th century mean of 13.9 degrees Celsius. The question asks where on the chart the most unpredictable variations occurred. The key term is unpredictable. In data analysis, unpredictability refers to high variance or volatility, values that swing erratically from one observation to the next with no consistent direction. A long, smooth upward trend is not unpredictable, even if values change. A singular peak is not unpredictable, it's a singular data point. Unpredictability requires repeated, irregular fluctuations. Option A points to a single peak in 2010. A peak describes one moment, not variability. Even if accurate, that would describe a maximum value, not unpredictable behavior. Option B claims warming became inconsistent from 1980 onwards, ranging from 0.1 to 1.0. The problem here is that a steady directional climb is the opposite of unpredictability. A range from 0.1 to plus 1.0 across decades describes a gradual trend, which is highly predictable. Option C claims temperatures dropped suddenly in 1880 and trended downwards for 3 decades. A sustained downward trend is directional and predictable. Option D describes the 1940s and 3 decades that followed. The yearly averages swung above and below the global mean by large amounts year over year. This describes year-to-year high variance with no consistent direction, which is unpredictable variation. So the answer is D. The demographer's claim has 2 linked parts. First, birth rates have gradually declined over the past 2 decades. Second, the median age will continue its slow but steady rise, because there isn't a rapidly growing young population to offset older cohorts. For data to support this claim, it must illustrate both halves of the causal logic, fewer young people and more old people. Median age rises when the population's distribution shifts. Either the bottom, young ages, shrinks, the top, older ages, grows, or both. The demographer's claim emphasizes that both are happening. Option A compares the largest age group in 2020 to that in 2000, age 30 versus age 40. This is a single data point about which cohort happens to be largest in each year, and doesn't tell us about birth rates or the older population. It is a snapshot rather than a trend. Option B states that the population age 10 or less has decreased over the last 2 decades, while the population age 55 and above has increased. This is exactly what the demographer describes. So, option B is correct. The passage frames a transition. Earlier technology change automated physical tasks, but now AI performs more like human brain power and is therefore positioned to affect cognitive work, professional and office jobs. The Pew Research is about who is exposed to this new wave of AI-driven change. For the answer to be correct, it must use data from the chart and be consistent with the passage's framing of AI affecting cognitive office-type work. Option A claims men's exposure was 17% and links this to automated jobs already affected by past technology. This misreads the passage. The passage specifically distinguishes new AI exposure from prior automation. AI exposure is about white-collar cognitive work, not the older blue-collar automation, so the framing is wrong. Option B asserts that women's exposure was 4% greater than men's, then attempts to explain that gap by claiming that women identified as white and the men as American Indian or Pacific Islander. This is a non sequitur. Racial composition cannot be inferred by a percentage gap, and a Pew chart breaking down exposure by sex and race wouldn't establish the kind of causal linking between the 2 categories. Option C states that nearly 20% of all workers are exposed to AI, that workers with a bachelor's degree or higher show the highest exposure, and that workers of Asian descent also show high exposure. This aligns precisely with the passage's framing. Cognitive jobs requiring higher education are exactly where AI's brain-like capabilities have the most reach. Demographic groups concentrated in higher education and professional fields would therefore show higher exposure. This is also consistent with the actual Pew Research findings on AI exposure, so option C is correct.